Number 10. Omega Red. While Omega Red has also lost to Wolverine in the past, he's also had his fair share of victories against him. Omega Red initially proved almost too powerful to Wolverine, especially when it came to the use of death spores which weakened him. There was a time when Omega Red successfully captured the hero, and he only succeeded in surviving by getting help to escape, unfit to take on Omega Red alone. More recently in the comics, Omega Red surfaced wanting to join Krakoa, but he was actually revealed to be in league with Dracula, and in fact helped Dracula to get his hands on Wolverine's blood, enabling the villain to walk in the sun. Since then, Omega Red has chosen to portray Dracula being truthful with the mutants and becoming their true ally, but Logan of course still finds it hard to trust him. He doesn't really believe he's the true ally. Perhaps because Wolverine himself remembers all the times that Omega Red has stabbed him in the front and the back and just basically stabbed him all around with his carbonadium tentacles. Number 9. Mysterio. Mysterio in an alternate reality completely defeats Wolverine, and in the most horrible way. In the Old Man Logan continuity, Mysterio manipulated Wolverine, getting him to fight against and kill all the X-Men, explaining how this could have happened given all their amazing abilities by claiming that his friends would likely hesitate to take him out. Wolverine at the time thought he was taking on a bunch of supervillains who had invaded the mansion, and Mysterio also claims that Wolverine's ego is kinda to blame for him accepting the illusion. After all, Wolverine believing that he could have possibly taken on all of these supervillains himself all at once does seem pretty arrogant. I gotta say, I kind of agree with Mysterio here. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists where we get to tell you stories about people kicking other people's butts, I love telling these stories, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Sabretooth. Sabretooth has beaten Logan so many times that I've personally lost count. Sometimes it seems as though Victor's sole purpose has been to make Wolverine suffer. Case in point, how it became a tradition for Sabretooth to go and mess up Wolverine once a year on his birthday. Sabretooth has also been the mastermind behind a great deal of psychological plots to mess with Logan, including at one point pitting his son Daken against him, forcing Wolverine to kill his own son. Wolverine thought this was how it had to be at the time, but he would actually later learn that it all happened due to the machinations of Sabretooth. People don't often think about how smart Sabretooth is, but he's pretty crafty. Number 7. The Collector. While some may now be more familiar with the character of the Collector himself, thanks to the Guardians of the Galaxy Marvel Cinematic Universe films, fans may not know that he and Wolverine actually had some pretty big beef. What happened between these two? Well, Wolverine basically freed thousands of people from a planet where the Collector had them imprisoned. You see, these people were the survivors of planets that Galactus had destroyed, whom the Collector had, well, collected. But you know, to these people, they are being held against their will, as prisoners, on a shielded planet. A character named Arya, who kind of looks like a space elf, reaches out to Wolverine, seeking his help to free these people, and he answers her plea, getting into a direct conflict with the Collector later on in this story arc known as The Great Escape, part of the 1988 Wolverine series. Basically, if you want lots of random stories, you need to read the 1988 Wolverine series. Number 6. The Iron Monk. The Iron Monk appears to be a villain sent after Wolverine by the Hand while Logan is being held in prison in issue 108 of the Wolverine series that started in 1988. He proves to be a formidable foe and gives Wolverine a pretty good fight for a few pages. I will say I did enjoy it. The Iron Monk, you see, cannot be defeated by any mortal weapon nor any mortal hand. In the end, Wolverine ends up using the Honor Sword bestowed to him by the Silver Samurai. The Honor Sword was forged out of a meteorite by a demon and seems to do the trick, causing the Iron Monk to be reduced to a wisp of pink smoke and a robe. Number 5. Citadel. Despite the fact that Wolverine did later try to help Citadel and likely never truly saw him as an enemy, Citadel resented both Wolverine and Alpha Flight after they stopped him from achieving his goal. Citadel was one of the antagonists in issue 5 of Wolverine First Class, where Citadel was also known then as Weapon Y. Wolverine suspected he was also made by the same people who had put adamantium inside of him, as Citadel had adamantium skin, or an adamantium exoskeleton externally, instead of internally. Citadel was a soldier who was injured in action and ended up being experimented on instead of being properly treated. He wanted the government to be held accountable, and was holding government officials hostage in Quebec, Canada. Wolverine's mission was to deal with the situation, extract the superhuman threats, and secure the hostages. He didn't know that Citadel himself was also a potential victim until it was too late, and the government stepped in to cart Citadel off without Wolverine being able to do or say much about it. Number 4. ABDUL ALHAZRED. Fun fact, did you know that ABDUL ALHAZRED in HP Lovecraft lore is the character credited with the creation of the Necronomicon? Yeah, he is, and as such, he is also acknowledged as being its creator in the Marvel universe as well. He and Wolverine came to blows in Madripoor when ABDUL was trying to take over Tiger's crime syndicate. ABDUL attempted to attack Wolverine with a demon, but in the end, Wolverine survived, and ABDUL ended up trapped in the same demonic realm his demon pals had come from. Sucks to suck, I guess. Number 3. Magneto. Magneto is of course another major supervillain who bested Wolverine. He was the one responsible for transforming him into a feral version of himself, stripping Wolverine of the adamantium that coated his skeleton. This was a huge part of us learning more about Wolverine's abilities and his power set. This is when it was revealed that his claws were actually bone claws and they were themselves coated. We also learned here that he had the capacity to be intensely feral. I mean, we'd always known that Wolverine had a wild side, a feral side. It had been alluded to in the comics, but we didn't know just how wild Logan could be. Don't worry though, although Wolverine lost all of his adamantium in the fight against Magneto and his nose, Professor X made sure that Magneto paid for what he'd done, and that he could never hurt anyone again by completely cutting off his mind, in essence kinda leaving Magneto still physically alive but brain dead. It should also be noted that Magneto has killed Wolverine many times across multiple different realities and timelines. Number 2. Apocalypse. Apocalypse is a villain that Wolverine has faced across many different realities, whether with a team or on his own. In some realities, Wolverine has managed to eventually win the war against Apocalypse, but has also lost battles here and there along the way. In the X-Men animated series from the 90s, we see no exception, as Wolverine attempts to take on Apocalypse alongside the X-Men. When it's his turn to strike, he completely misses Apocalypse with his claws, who manages to escape along with most of his horsemen. Kind of embarrassing. Number 1. Dark Phoenix. While Jean Grey would likely never want to hurt Wolverine, and he has honestly almost killed her on a few occasions across the multiverse, always to her benefit of course, usually, to avoid her having to suffer. When Dark Phoenix emerges, it's quickly made apparent just how much stronger this persona and force is in comparison to Wolverine. When the darker side of Phoenix Force makes itself known at one point during Phoenix Endsong, Wolverine doesn't stand a chance against it. In fact, he only survives his fight with the Dark Phoenix because he fits into her plan, with her aiming to use him as bait. It does seem as though he succeeds in weakening the Dark Phoenix, but once again, this seems to all be part of the Phoenix Force's plan, allowing her to take a more active role as she works towards getting what she wants, which she thinks at the time is Cyclops and his unlimited energy source, his optic blasts, but in reality what Phoenix really wants is to feel whole again and feel loved. What a lovely little moral at the end of that story. What do you think are some of the most powerful villains that Wolverine has ever lost to? Number 10. Father. Father was the only name we had for one of the scientists behind the mad science secret robotics project known as Project Descendant. Father, Mother, and Brother were the code names for the scientists behind the project, which ended up creating a race of synthetic beings deemed as hybrid. Due to the 3 team leaders bickering, the beings they created ended up being released out into the world. Later, the Father would attempt to lure the descendants of these beings back, and would also go on to work on expanding the Deathlock project, aiming ambitiously to connect all the Deathlock versions of superhumans, joining them together to build a better world. It was during this time that he crossed paths with the very secretive X-Force, which at the time was led by Wolverine, who had refused Cyclops' orders to disband the team, keeping it going in secret. Number 9. Brothers of the New World. Wolverine ended up fighting and taking out pretty much all of this group because they kidnapped and killed his friend Lucy, who tried to escape them. They were a cult whose leader, Cry, kept a harem of women at their base. Wolverine set about attacking the cult and killing all of its members right around the time one of the women attempted to escape, who was actually a government agent who had been investigating the cult before being taken herself and added to their numbers of imprisoned women. This group of villains made an appearance during the first story arc of the 2003 Wolverine series entitled Brotherhood. Oh, also they were in part created by Greg Rucka, fun fact. Number 8. LCD. LCD is one of Donald Pierce's creations. She is an android who resembles a little girl and was created to kill Wolverine by self-detonating. However, she did not herself want to die, as she also was a smart android who ended up valuing her life. In the end, she reprogrammed the android doppelganger of Wolverine known as Albert, built to lure the real Wolverine into her trap, and instead would become Wolverine's ally. Number 7. Mystique. Mystique is one of those villains you don't want to underestimate because, well, it's really dangerous to do so. Case in point, why do I say case in point so much? Who's been saying that to me that I've been putting this in my script? An example being when Wolverine thought he had killed her and would never see her again, only for her to return, having been resurrected by the Hand, to get revenge on Wolverine for killing her. She not only defeated him in a physical sense, but also in a mental sense, using him to get information and also to mess with his head when she posed as Yukio. She really messed with him. But that's Mystique for you. Number 6. SPORE. While SPORE was an insanely powerful villain who did end up defeated in the end, it wasn't actually Wolverine that did the defeating in this scenario. Though he did fight against SPORE, SPORE appears in one of the earlier stories in Wolverine Volume 2 and was created by Archie Goodwin and John Byrne. It was an ancient entity who first appeared in issue 21, where we learned that the drug that was being used to increase the strength of Roundhouse at the cost of his sanity was actually a part of that villain, and that using that drug was kind of how it infected its victims and was able to move more into the physical world through them. SPORE, it turned out, was an ancient bioweapon created by the Deviants long ago that had laid dormant on planet Earth after requiring the strength of a Celestial in order to be defeated the first time around. Although Wolverine struggled to defeat this enemy, the possibly mutant healer Sister Salvation managed to use her powers to defeat it, cleansing SPORE permanently, but at great cost, with her hands and possibly ability to heal becoming dramatically damaged afterwards. But Wolverine couldn't have done that alone. He needed the Sister Salvation backup for that one. Number 5. Madeline Pryor. Another enemy who Wolverine likely wouldn't stand a chance against is Madeline Pryor. In the What If Inferno issue, we get to see what would happen if Madeline Pryor had won the day and she and Sim basically turned Wolverine into their little pet, unleashing his feral side and making him a complete monster. And I really do mean a complete monster. The hero doesn't even stand a chance against their influence, as they help him to give in to the darker side of himself that he's always been working so hard to repress. It's even worse than losing a battle or his life, because in this story Wolverine loses his morality and basically his humanity. I think that's worse. Is that worse than death? I think it's worse than death. If you lose entirely who you are. Number 4. Dracula. Dracula is a long-standing villain for the X-Men and Wolverine. As we discussed earlier with Omega Red, the villain recently managed to best Wolverine by concocting a plan to capture him and use his blood to power up himself and his other loyal vampires, forcing Omega to become his undercover agent on Krakoa. Of course, in the end, Omega Red would turn against him, allowing Wolverine and the other mutants to strike back, but during that first story of the new series back in issue 1, Wolverine saw himself pretty heartily defeated at the hands of Dracula, and what made it worse is that he didn't really even understand at the time that he had been playing right into Dracula's hands. Number 3. Romulus. Does everyone remember Romulus? One of the most weirdly epic and yet short-lived villains of almost all time in Wolverine's rogue history. He had this huge buildup, and we went on to find out that he was an ancient villain from prehistoric times, only to find out that this was all a lie and apparently a ruse to distract Wolverine. He was, however, the villain responsible for cutting Daken out of his dead mother, Itsu's womb, and for training him and turning him into a killing machine. He manipulated Daken from day one, helping to turn him against his father, and was the one responsible for helping him to bond the melted down Muramasa blade to Daken's claws. Or at least helped him get the idea. Because, you know, the Tinkerer obviously did that in actuality. I don't even know if Romulus knows how to melt metal. Probably. Number 2. Gorgon. If you don't know the Gorgon and this pretty awesome story featuring him, you should. During the third Wolverine series from 2003, Wolverine ends up getting entangled with the Gorgon when he is attempting to locate Ichiro, the missing son of one of his dead fiance's cousins, who has been kidnapped. say one of his dead fiancés because I feel like Wolverine's got a few of those. Gorgon is a telepathic mutant who, as his name implies, can turn those who make direct eye contact with him into stone. Gorgon ends up capturing Wolverine and giving him over to the Hand, who brainwashed him and turned him into their own agent. However, Wolverine would later break free of their control and would even go on to kill Gorgon using his own claws to reflect Gorgon's deadly gaze back at him, transforming Gorgon into stone before shattering him. But don't worry, Gorgon would be resurrected later on and return. Gotta love those old mythology references. Comics taking old stories and making them new again, and also never letting people die. Number 1. Ogun. Ogun was once Wolverine's martial arts mentor and a powerful sorcerer and telepath, but later became Logan's enemy after being spurned by Wolverine, joining the Yakuza and going on to kidnap, train, and brainwash Kitty Pryde during the Kitty Pryde and Wolverine story. Ogun even managed to turn Kitty Pryde against Logan, sending her to attack him when Wolverine had come to rescue her. Fortunately, Wolverine was able to break Ogun's control over Kitty. In the end, Kitty fought Ogun but was unable to defeat her former master. However, Wolverine was able to do so. After being beaten but spared by Wolverine, Ogun attacked Kitty once more and was killed by Wolverine as a result. Of course, this is comics, so this wouldn't be the last we'd see of Ogun by a long shot. Number 10. The Flower Cartel. This one might be lesser known as they are relatively new. Not just an enemy to Wolverine either, but an enemy to likely all of mutant kind and the mutant nation of Krakoa. The Flower Cartel are a group responsible for smuggling the Krakoan miracle flowers, which mutants use to create medicinal drugs for the world in exchange for the global acknowledgement, rights, and respect of their mutant nation. They don't just steal these flowers, but have been using them to create recreational, potent, hallucinogenic drugs. The drugs they've created are so powerful that they often cause the death of users, and may even be affiliated with mind control or possession of those exposed to the drug. We're not really sure yet. In Wolverine's newest series, he teams up with CIA agent Jeff Bannister to try and find out who exactly is behind the Flower Cartel's criminal activities. Number 9. Hobgoblin. I think we all know Hobgoblin fairly well, if you're a Spider-Man fan that is, but did you know that he also tussled with Wolverine and the X-Men? This altercation went down in the Spider-Man animated series from the 90s, where actually Mark Hamill himself voiced Hobgoblin. We see Wolverine, the X-Men, and Spider-Man forced to deal with Hobgoblin in the season 2 episode titled Mutants Revenge, which is a crossover episode with the 90s X-Men animated series. Yay, I love crossovers. After Beast is kidnapped, the X-Men go out looking for him, which leads them to team up with Spider-Man, who is also looking for Hank. But Wolverine doesn't like Spider-Man, and while these two fight one another, Hobgoblin also sees this as a unique opportunity to attack all of the above parties, causing grief for Wolverine while he attempts to rescue Beast from Dr. Herbert Landon, who also is another random, lesser known enemy of Wolverine's in that episode anyways. Number 8. The Savage Land Mutates. When it comes to other mutant and even mutate groups outside of the X-Men, people are not always as knowledgeable. If you are just discovering mutant kind now, you may not know many other mutant groups outside of the X-Men, and there's sometimes a villainous counterpart, often led by Magneto, the Brotherhood of Mutants, or the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. But there are actually a lot more groups than just these two. There are the Morlocks, who often live in the sewers, and there are the Savage Land Mutates, who generally work with Sauron and are, you guessed it, from the Savage Lands. Mutates are like mutants, but the difference is generally that they weren't born with natural abilities which later activated, or natural mutations, but instead they evolved to become mutated, gaining powers or a physical mutation. The Savage Land Mutates are occasionally enemies of the X-Men and by extension Wolverine, who is a member of the heroic mutant team. They even pop up in the 1988 run of Wolverine in issue 69, where Wolverine knocks a lot of them down in order to get to Sauron. Number 7. Lazir. Lazir, or Azrael as he is also known, claims to be another form of death, one that we've seen Wolverine face before, and although we don't always see it, Lazir is an angel of death that Wolverine in theory is forced to face every time he has a near-death experience. Lazir battles for Logan's life, but Wolverine manages to fight him back each time, prevailing and ensuring his life belongs to him only. However, should Wolverine fail to defeat Azrael, the being would then claim his life and he would die. Apparently. Number 6. Tiger Shark. One of the first time these two ever crossed paths, it was one of the most random fights in comics. Wolverine and Tiger Shark originally started fighting because La Bandera, a mutant with emotion, manipulation, and energy manipulation abilities, who mainly uses her powers to make people feel more patriotic and empathic, was fighting Tiger Shark. Wolverine stumbled upon their fight and felt attracted to La Bandera and compelled to help her, mainly due to her mutant ability, obviously. Together the two made quick work of Tiger Shark, and then ran away together, because that's how that goes. Number 5. Bloodscream. Bloodscream would end up partnering with Wolverine's other lesser known nemesis that we talked about on the part 1 of this list, Roughhouse. While many associate these two as being partners in crime, this isn't the only Wolverine villain that Bloodscream has teamed up with in the past. He has also teamed up with Albert and LCD as well, and in the Old Man Logan universe partnered up with both Kraven and Roughhouse in an attempt to help Kraven capture Old Man Logan. Number 4. Nuke. Many people forget about Nuke, but he is a lesser known villain in the comics who was actually created by Wolverine during his time as a Weapon X operative. He ended up securing Nuke when he was just a child for Project Homegrown. Weapon Plus, with Wolverine's help, would later drive him insane and turn him into a brainwashed cyborg to be used as a weapon. Even years later, these two still come to blows. During Death of Wolverine, Nuke would accept a contract to capture Wolverine and bring him into Viper alive. This would lead to an epic fight between the two where Wolverine would only end up winning by smashing his own skull repeatedly into Nuke's until he was unable to fight back. Is this the most metal way that a fight has been won in comics? Let me know in the comments. Most metal fights, that's a list we need to do. Number 3. Damage. For those who are unfamiliar with Damage, he's basically Marvel's version of the Terminator. There's a lot of parallels there anyways. He was originally the human Jamie Ortiz. The Kingpin turned him into a cybernetic being after Damage was brought to the brink of death by Punisher. Kingpin later gave Damage cosmetic surgery to make him look identical to the Punisher as well, and used him against Frank Castle, attempting to break Castle and ruin the Punisher's name by having Damage kill a bunch of innocent people. Wolverine and Damage both ripped one another apart in a fight, and when Punisher finally showed up, he finished Damage off by setting him on fire. Number 2. Geist. Nikolaus Geist was a mad scientist from Germany working on the side of the Axis during World War II. He was working to create a new type of super soldier for Germany, similar to the United States super soldier Captain America, aka Steve Rogers. Roughhouse was his main test subject, and in the end, Wolverine was the one to free Roughhouse and put a stop to Geist. Geist was also a cyborg, but Wolverine cut off his metal shell in an attempt to kill him. It was later revealed that while he was suspected dead and was incapacitated after this fight, he did however manage to survive. However, soon after, another mutant, Magneto, did kill him, so he dead. Number 1. Roughhouse. Going back again to the days of BADDUL and Madripoor for who would get to be the king or queen of crime, and in effect rule Madripoor, Wolverine found himself allied with Yasan Hoan, aka Tiger. It was also during this time that he first fought with Roughhouse, who made his first appearance in issue 4 of Wolverine's series from 1988. Roughhouse was allied with General Koi, and got his superpowers from either his relation to the mythical race of Asgardians, or from being a mutant, or maybe a bit of both. It's a little foggy. Though they are enemies and remained enemies thereafter, Wolverine did still save Roughhouse from Geist, because experimenting on people in Logan's book is just plain wrong. And I think in everyone's book, let's not experiment on people. Can we all agree on that?